South Africa now finds itself in a period of intense political and economic uncertainty following a landmark ruling by the High Court, which has ordered President Cyril Ramaphosa to fully disclose every foreign account connected to him in any capacity. The decision has been widely seen as a decisive statement from the judiciary. No one, not even the president, is above the law. Transparency and accountability, especially in matters of public finance, are obligations that cannot be sidestepped. Under the court's order, President Ramaphosa must reveal the full extent of his financial interests, including all international investments, bank deposits, and transactions, whether held directly in his name or indirectly through intermediaries. The ruling emphasizes that there is no room for ambiguity or delay. Full transparency is mandatory, particularly in light of allegations of financial misconduct. These allegations, which include embezzlement, misuse of state resources, and unauthorized transfers of public funds to offshore accounts, have gained renewed attention as investigative journalists and whistleblowers continue to raise concerns over suspicious financial activity linked to individuals in the president's inner circle. What may have once been dismissed as speculative or politically motivated now carries substantial weight, igniting public concern and prompting demands for urgent accountability. The implications of the court's decision are significant. Noncompliance could lead to severe consequences, including fines, prosecution for contempt of court, or even criminal charges. Legal experts have described the ruling as one of the most consequential judicial actions taken against a sitting president in South Africa's democratic era, highlighting its historic importance within the African National Congress, ANC. Reports indicate that the decision has stirred anxiety within the party, as full disclosure could expose entrenched corruption spanning multiple levels of the organization. There are concerns that senior figures may have known of or benefited from financial arrangements tied to the president's offshore accounts. This has intensified factional tensions within the ANC, as rival groups jockey for influence while attempting to distance themselves from potential fallout. Opposition parties view the ruling as a major opportunity to challenge the ANC's dominance, positioning themselves as champions of accountability. They argue that the decision validates long-standing claims of systemic corruption at the highest levels of government. Meanwhile, public reaction has been a mixture of shock, anger, and cautious optimism. Many citizens weary of recurring corruption scandals see the ruling as a potential turning point, a sign that accountability may finally prevail. Social media has been flooded with demands for justice and calls for complete financial disclosure. While some have speculated that foreign-held funds could have been intended for public infrastructure projects, such claims have been met with widespread skepticism, particularly by citizens struggling with unemployment, poverty, and failing services. For many, the possibility that national resources may have been diverted abroad represents a profound betrayal of public trust. President Ramaphosa has yet to issue a formal statement, though insiders suggest he intends to comply with the court's directive despite the shock at the breadth and complexity of the disclosures required. He now faces the dual challenge of compiling detailed financial records while attempting to stabilize a fractured party and reassure a skeptical public. Legal analysts warn this may only be the beginning, as investigators scrutinize the president's financial affairs. Evidence of deliberate diversion of state funds into illicit offshore accounts could trigger criminal charges, impeachment proceedings, or even force him to resign, events that would send shockwaves across South Africa's political landscape. Within the ANC, the ruling has amplified existing criticisms of Ramaphosa's leadership, prompting calls for structural reform and a potential overhaul of top leadership. Analysts caution that internal discord could weaken the party, jeopardizing voter confidence in upcoming elections and opening the door for opposition parties. Beyond domestic politics, The court's decision has been hailed by constitutional experts as a powerful affirmation of South Africa's democratic institutions, showcasing the judiciary's independence and its ability to uphold accountability at the highest levels of government. Yet the ruling comes at a time of national fragility, with economic challenges, persistent power shortages, rising crime, and strained state institutions. Critics warn that the presidency could become consumed by legal battles, distracting from governance and exacerbating public frustration. International observers, investors, and financial institutions are closely monitoring developments, aware that uncertainty surrounding the president's financial integrity could have tangible effects on investment and economic stability. Forensic auditors, anti-corruption agencies, and investigative bodies are expected to carefully examine all disclosures, tracing account histories, global transactions, and potential concealment of assets. Any irregularities could escalate the crisis and reshape South Africa's political trajectory. Opposition parties and civil society groups are demanding full public disclosure, arguing that transparency is essential to restoring trust. Protesters have warned that failure to comply could provoke mass demonstrations and renewed calls for the president's resignation. This ruling has laid bare deep-seated dissatisfaction with South Africa's political system, long criticized for failing to deliver on promises and repeatedly implicated in corruption. Many commentators view it as a watershed moment, a reckoning with unresolved scandals and a test of the ANC's commitment to accountability. The challenge extends beyond the president, striking at the party itself. How it responds could determine the future of governance in South Africa. As the country stands at a critical crossroads, citizens and international observers alike watch closely, knowing that the outcome could shape the nation's democratic trajectory for years to come. As the legal process moves forward, the pressure on South Africa's institutions is intensifying. The High Court ruling has not only placed the presidency under unprecedented scrutiny, but it has also tested the strength of the country's broader accountability framework. Prosecutors, regulators, and oversight bodies now face a defining moment, whether they can pursue the truth without fear or favor, regardless of political consequences. Behind the scenes, legal teams are reportedly preparing for a prolonged and complex battle. Financial disclosure on a global scale is rarely straightforward. Offshore jurisdictions, shell companies, trusts, and layered ownership structures can obscure asset trails for years. Experts warn that uncovering the full picture may require international cooperation, mutual legal assistance treaties, and coordination with foreign financial regulators. Each discovery could raise further questions, potentially widening the scope of the investigation beyond the president himself. Economists caution that the unfolding crisis could have immediate and long-term effects on South Africa's already fragile economy. Market confidence is closely tied to perceptions of political stability and institutional integrity. Any indication that the executive branch is compromised by corruption risks triggering capital flight, currency volatility, and reduced investor appetite. For ordinary citizens, this translates into higher prices, fewer jobs, and deeper economic strain. Civil society organizations have also stepped into the spotlight. Anti-corruption groups argue that the ruling represents a rare opportunity to reset the country's governance culture. They insist that transparency must not end with court-ordered disclosures, but should extend to systemic reform, stronger asset declaration laws, and harsher penalties for financial misconduct. Activists warn that failure to act decisively could reinforce the belief that justice in South Africa is selective rather than universal. Within government departments, uncertainty is reportedly growing. Senior officials fear that expanded investigations may expose broader networks of patronage and financial abuse that have survived multiple administrations. This has fueled speculation that additional resignations, suspensions, or internal disciplinary actions could follow if evidence begins to implicate more political figures. Internationally, the case is being watched as a litmus test for democratic resilience in Africa's most industrialized economy. Foreign governments and watchdog organizations have long praised South Africa's constitution and judiciary as pillars of post-apartheid democracy. How this crisis is handled may influence future diplomatic relations, aid considerations, and perceptions of governance standards across the region. Public sentiment remains volatile. While some citizens remain skeptical, convinced that powerful figures will ultimately evade accountability, others believe the ruling marks the beginning of a long-delayed reckoning. Community discussions, radio call-ins, and online forums reflect a nation deeply divided between cynicism and cautious hope. For many, the question is no longer whether corruption exists, but whether consequences will finally follow. The ANC now faces a defining crossroads. Party leaders must decide whether to close ranks in defense of the president or allow the judicial process to unfold without interference, even if it threatens internal unity. Political analysts argue that this choice could determine the party's survival as a dominant force. Continued association with corruption risks accelerating voter erosion, especially among younger South Africans who feel increasingly disconnected from liberation-era loyalties. As investigations progress, the possibility of further revelations looms large. Financial disclosures may expose inconsistencies, unexplained wealth, or transactions that demand criminal explanation. Each revelation has the potential to shift public opinion, intensify protests, and escalate calls for decisive political action. Ultimately, this moment transcends the fate of one leader. It challenges South Africa to confront a deeper question: whether the promise of constitutional democracy can withstand the corrosive effects of unchecked power and financial secrecy. The answer will be shaped not only by court rulings, but by the resolve of institutions, the courage of whistleblowers, and the willingness of citizens to demand accountability. As events continue to unfold, one reality is clear: South Africa is entering a period that may redefine its political identity. Whether this crisis becomes a catalyst for renewal or another chapter of disillusionment will depend on what happens next.